Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Kiera.
Okay, and what type of dealership did you visit?
I went to a Honda dealership.
Awesome. Was that last night or this morning?
This morning.
Tell us what went down.
Well, I pulled up to the dealership and I parked in the front.
Okay.
And I kind of sat in my car for a minute, and then I got out and I was looking around, and when I pulled up, there were about 6 guys inside the dealership standing at the door.
Oh boy.
And so I'm thinking, wow, they're going to come out and help me. So I get out of my car and no one comes out, and so I was like, cool, I'm doing this on my own. And I went and I started to walk over towards the car. As I was coming up, another employee was coming out, and he stopped and he was like, hey, is anybody helping you? And I was like, no. And then he was like, okay, new or pre-owned? And I was like, I don't care.
Sure. At this point in time, you're an uneducated customer. You don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so at that moment, about 3 of the guys all came out of the thing when they saw him come. And then I was standing there with the guy who greeted me initially, and he was like, well, you got it? And then the other guy was like, do you got it? And he's like, I got it.
Whoa, how important did that make you feel at that point in time?
At that point, I felt like a nuisance. Like,
right.
I shouldn't be here.
They did everything but flip a coin.
Yeah. And so the guy's like, I got it. And then he was like, no, it's okay. I'll take it. And so,
Take it? It? Are you an it? Are you an it?
No,
Come on.
not it.
All right, that's crazy.
And so the guy who said hi to me, I was like, okay. And so he walked back in. And then the guy who came up, Howard, he came over and he was like, hi, how are you? My name is Howard. What's your name? And I was like, Kiera. And he was like, cool. So he pulls out a little spiral notebook. Okay. And he writes my name down. Okay. And then he asked the same question that the other guy asked, new or pre-owned.
Right.
And I was like, well, you know, I really don't care. And he was like, well, what are you looking for? And I was like, I really don't care what kind of car it is. I just want a car with really good gas mileage.
Right.
And so he was like, okay, cool. And he was like, well, he's like, let me go over here and show you. And he's like, are you going to be paying, you know, financing and pre-owned, all this number?
He opened up the price store.
Yeah. And I explained to him, I was like, well, I'll probably be paying cash for it. I was like, I probably won't be paying for it. Right. I was like, I'll probably be paying cash for it and we'll be done. And so he walked me over and he's like, well, I'll just show you these Civics. He's like, because they have, he told me the gas mileage on them. He's like, well, we have some pre-owned ones here. And he's like, I'll show them to you because they're going to be less expensive. I guess he could tell that I was young. So he's
okay.
Like,
but let's stop there for a second. Clearly he skipped a step, an important step, which is what? The interview. Yeah. But at least at the very least, if he's going to attempt to do the interview on lot, start showing you cars, and you've already made it clear you're not financing, okay, and that you're paying cash, at that point in time, don't you think it's going to be an important question to ask, you know, where on the top end or low end of what you're going to spend in cash? Yeah. Before I just insult you and start showing you a bunch of cars that either, number one, you get excited about and it's you don't have enough cash to spend, or number two, it's about half of what you planned on spending, right? Okay. Did he ask that question at all?
No.
Okay.
Actually, we walked over to the cars, and he's like, well, what are you looking for in the car? And I was like, the gas mileage is most important. I do tons of driving around. I go places. I'm volunteering. I'm always bouncing around. I was like, I'm an intern. I'm doing all this stuff, and I really just need a car with good gas mileage. It's like, I don't want any of the bells and the whistles. It's like, I don't need navigation. I don't need Bluetooth. I was like, my phone can do all of that. I was like, I just want a car that has good gas mileage. I don't want any of the tinkers. And he was like, okay. So we went over to the car, and he was like, well, what color are you looking for? You want a dark or a medium or a light color? Okay. And I was like, well, generally I like bright colored cars. And I was like, but if you don't have any of those, I either want a white or a black car. Right. And he was like, okay. And so he was like, well, we have this, it was a lighter blue car, and then a silverish car, and then a brownish car. And I didn't like any of those. And he was like, but you said black. And he was like, so I'll take you over and let you look at this black one. And so I went over and I looked at the black one. And he was like, well, I know you said you don't want a sunroof or navigation. And he was like, but this has it in it, but I know color is important to you. Right. But to me, I would rather pay less and have a non-colored car than have the bells and the whistles and things that I don't even care
Right.
for.
And that information would be determined in the proper interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so at that moment, he asked me about where I was going to school. And I was like, all right. I was like, you asked me about where I was going to school. So I told him where I went to school and what I was doing here. I told him that I came back home, do an internship, and that I was doing it for a year, but it fell through this semester. And I was like, so I'm just at home hanging out and working. And he was like, oh, that's cool. What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be a doctor. And then at that moment, I felt really special. I was like, wow, even though you don't care about my car, you care about me.
Right.
And so at that moment, he was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, do you want to drive it? And I was like, no.
Right.
I was like, I want to know how much the thing cost.
Yep.
And I was like, I want to know how much we're going to have to pay for it.
Not in control of the sales process.
And then,
price.
And then he was like, so you said you're going to pay cash. And he was like, well, these are going to be pre-owned. We don't have any that are like $11,000 or $12,000 cars. And he's like, so if you're going to pay cash for it, he's like, I just want to let you know that ahead of time. And at that moment, I was like, oh, he's thinking that, you know, I'm a 20-year-old kid. I'm in college. Don't have that much money.
Right.
And so I'm not going to be able to pay cash. When reality, I'm looking for a car. And my uncle's going to just buy it.
Sure. Right.
And so I'm not worried about it.
That's real world. It happens all the time.
But he was like, so I was like, all right, I'll tell him. I was like, well, if that's going to be a problem, I was like, then maybe you have to tell me what financing would look like. And he was like, well, how much could you put down? And I was like, well, today I could put down $3,000. I was like, I could just do that. It would be no problem. And he was like, okay, cool. And he was like, well, all right, so you don't want to drive it? And I was like, no, I'm really just trying to see how much. He's like, oh, you're doing the preliminary thing. And I was like, okay. and
no, let me break out my crystal ball. And, you know.
And so
okay.
I was like, yeah, I was like, if you could just really tell me how much the car costs.
Right.
And that's all I want to know. He's like, sure. So he walked me inside, sat down at his desk, and he pulls out this little wrinkled up paper from his pocket. And I was like, this is not attractive. And it was all pockety. And he pulled it out, sat down, and he was like, well, flips through, looks for it on these, it's like 4-sheet packet, looks for it, pulls it out. He was like, well, on the way in, he showed me a Toyota Corolla that was white.
Yep.
And he was like, that's white, and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles like the other one. He was like, and I know you wanted a white car. And he's like, so we'll look at both of them.
Wow, it's like free-for-all. You're just all over the place.
And so I was like, okay. And so he tells me how much the Corolla is first. He's like, well, this one's going to be $16,990. And he was like, it's probably going to be much cheaper than the Civic, so let's go with that one. And I was like, okay. And he was like, it has the lifetime warranty. He pulled it out, and he was like, this is what we'd be able to cover in service. And he showed me if this happened, blah, 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 what we would be able to do.
Right.
And then he was like, so where are you planning on going to med school?
Sure.
And I was like, cool, we're back on me. I like me. So I was like, well, my dream is to go to Stanford. I like to go to Stanford. And he's like, really? He's like, my brother lives in San Diego, and he's in San Francisco all the time. He's like, if you ever are out there in the area, he was like, let me know, and I'll give him a call, and he can show you around. He has lots of connections up there. And I was like, okay, cool. He's like, yeah, he's a doctor too. And I was like, cool.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I spend tons of time in California.
Yeah.
And he was like, my grandparents live there. And he's like, awesome. And he was like, well, just let me know.
Yeah.
And so he was like, here's my card. He's like, if you want to come back within the next couple of days or anything.
The receipt at the end of the meal.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't know if the Corolla will still be here.
Right.
But I'll be here. And he was like, and you can just come by and let me know, and that'll be good. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, well, thank you for your help.
Right.
And he was like, thank you. And I was like, well, have a great day. And he was like, you too. And I was like,
well, did you meet a manager?
No.
And how much more informed did you leave as versus coming in?
I was not. He didn't tell me anything that I didn't know about the car.
Right. And so you weren't forced. There was no decision to make.
No.
And yet
he made it for me.
Exactly. And yet you even told him, I've got about $3,000 to put down. So provided he would have, let me just back up and quit doing all the talking. What would you have done differently based upon your 1 day of training?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have looked at me and automatically assumed that I'm a broke college student.
Exactly.
And said, oh, this is a kid, and she's probably going to want a little bitty car, and she's not going to be able to do much.
Right.
And I would make sure I greeted me properly. Or if I were the customer, greet the customer properly, and took them back to my desk.
Right.
And made sure I found out everything that they needed and everything that I needed so that we could let them know what I could do for them and
exactly.
what they could do for me.
Yeah. Because what are you doing during that interview process?
You're taking control of the sales process.
Absolutely. And by taking control of the sales process, we're also, what are we determining during that interview process?
What they need in a car.
What they need in a car, what their wants and needs are, to properly pick out the right car instead of wasting their time showing them a bunch of wrong cars. But you know what happens a lot of times too, is there's a lot of times cash customers come in a lot. And let's say he would have asked a question, you would have said, you know, 10 grand's my tops. You know, sometimes you don't find the car you want for 10 grand. And it happens a lot. So, or there's a shortage of $10,000 cars. But you know what's happened sometimes? Is sometimes either a couple things happen. They get excited enough about one car where maybe all of a sudden magically more money comes out, or maybe there's a paid for trade-in, or maybe, you know what, I figured out a way that you're going to school, tuition, books, this, that, the other way. I figured out a way that you can just take that $10,000, just keep it somewhere, let it earn interest, and let's see if we can come up with an affordable payment first. And if we need to, we can just use that as, you know, an investment towards your newer vehicle to get the payment where it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
You finance the difference, or you finance a portion of it. Maybe I've got another solution you haven't even thought of, because I'm the consultant, because I'm in charge, because I'm in control of the sales process. In order for me to get what I want, you got to get what?
What I want.
What you want. And how am I going to determine what you want?
By asking the right questions.
And doing a proper interview. Do you understand now why I had you do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a lot more confident now?
Yeah.
Because after one day of training, you know that you could outsell circles around that guy.
Right, yeah.
Easily. And all the other ones flipping the coins out in the lot, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Round of applause.